He slammed the closet door just enough to leave a thin crack, holding his phone up to record. Bradley had done this test 100 times. Scatter cash across a room, hide, and wait for the dishonest help to expose themselves. But today felt different. Today, he wasn't just watching anyone. He was watching Keisha, the black maid he hired 2 days ago, the one he already assumed would fail just like the others. She froze when she saw the stack of money. $10,000, loosely spread across the marble desk like bait. Her eyes didn't widen. Her hands didn't shake. She didn't even look around the room to see if anyone was watching. That alone irritated him. He wanted fear. He wanted temptation. He wanted proof he was right about people like her. It has already made your blood boil, tap like, and subscribe so you don't miss stories where justice finally wins. But instead of touching the cash, Keisha calmly pulled out her phone, snapped a picture, and whispered, "Sir must have forgotten this here. Someone could try to steal it." Her voice wasn't shaky. It was steady, almost too steady. Bradley frowned behind the crack. She was supposed to hesitate. She was supposed to look guilty. She was supposed to make a mistake he could brag about later. But she didn't. She picked up every bill, counted it with careful fingers, placed it neatly into an envelope, and set it in the center of the desk with a note. Then she simply kept cleaning. No pause, no curiosity, no fear. Bradley zoomed his camera in, trying to find something, anything, to twist into a reason to punish her. But every move she made was precise, disciplined, almost annoyingly perfect. "This one thinks she's clever," he whispered, tightening his grip on his phone. They all slip eventually. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't even imagine, was that Keisha hadn't just seen the money. She had seen the camera's reflection. She knew he was watching, and she had already decided exactly how this game would end. And for the first time in his life, Bradley's trap wasn't catching anyone. He was the one walking straight into hers. The bus ride home that evening felt longer than usual. Keisha sat by the window, watching streetlights pass like slow blinks. Most people would have been shaken after almost stepping into a trap like that. But she wasn't most people. She'd grown up around tricks, tests, and men who had cruelty behind good suits. Bradley wasn't the first. He probably wouldn't be the last. When she reached her small apartment, Aaliyah, 9, greeted her with a hug around the waist. "Mama, you're late. Did the new job make you stay longer again?" Keisha smiled. "Just a long day, baby. Go finish your homework. I'll heat up dinner." Inside, the apartment was cramped but warm, filled with drawings on the fridge and school books on the table. Marcus, 12, sat quietly by the window, counting coins for a school project. He didn't look up until Keisha placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're hungry, aren't you?" she asked. He nodded, embarrassed. She kissed his head. "I got you." She cooked quickly, rice, beans, a little chicken, stretching everything the way single mothers master by force, not choice. While the kids ate, Keisha washed her hands and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. "Money on a table," she murmured. "On the second day? Really, Bradley?" She wiped the mirror with a towel. Not angry, just focused. Across town, in his mansion with marble floors and motion sensors in every hallway, Bradley rewatched the footage he'd recorded earlier. He studied the way she picked up the money, the way she didn't hesitate, the way she didn't panic. "Strange woman," he muttered. "She's hiding something." But he wasn't suspicious in the right way. He thought she was hiding poverty. He thought she was hiding shame. He thought she was hiding desperation. He didn't know she was hiding strategy. Back home, Keisha tucked her kids into bed. Aaliyah kissed her cheek. "Mama, was work okay today?" Keisha smiled softly. Work was interesting. When the lights went off, she didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with her phone, scrolling through the pictures she had taken of the money. Not because she needed proof she didn't steal, but because patterns mattered. And men like Bradley always repeated patterns. Always. She leaned back in her chair. If he wanted to play games, he picked the wrong opponent, because while he was testing her honesty, she had already begun testing his intentions, and she could tell. He was exactly the kind of man who would give her all the evidence she needed. Bradley was already waiting at the door the next morning, arms crossed, jaw tight, pretending he wasn't watching the driveway like a hawk. The moment Keisha stepped inside, he began his performance. "You're late," he snapped, even though she wasn't. "Yes, sir," she answered calmly. Traffic was heavy. He hated her tone, polite, steady, unbothered. Men like Bradley wanted reactions. Fear, apologies, cracks in the voice. But Keisha offered none. He walked beside her as she dusted the shelves. "People in your position," he said, pausing like he was choosing softer words, "usually make mistakes early on. I've seen it. Weak discipline. Poor work habits. It's predictable." Keisha wiped the shelf in one smooth motion. "I understand, sir." "That's the problem," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. "You people always say that." Her hand paused for half a second, just enough for him to smirk, thinking he finally struck a nerve. But she kept cleaning, steady as ever. Later, he accidentally left his wallet open on the counter. Credit cards visible, receipts sticking out, a $100 bill nearly falling out. She didn't touch it. She didn't even look at it twice. He hated that even more. As she cleaned the upstairs hall, Bradley leaned casually on the railing. "Tell me something, Keisha. Where do you learn to keep so controlled? Most maids I've hired lose their composure eventually." She looked up at him, the faintest smile at the corner of her mouth. "Life teaches you things, sir." But he didn't know what kind of life had taught her. He didn't know the storm she'd survived. He didn't know she had started recording their conversations. Her phone, tucked in her apron pocket, captured every racist breath he exhaled. When he finally walked away, she pulled a fresh trash bag from the drawer, then paused, not because of the trash, but because she saw it. Another setup, another trap, another test. But this one was almost too obvious. And that's when a quiet, dangerous thought entered her mind. Why is he pushing this hard? What does he try to confirm? What does he think he knows about her? If this happened in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you stand for fairness, hit subscribe. Keisha knelt to pick up a torn piece of paper near the trash can, but it wasn't trash. It was a printed email, a name she recognized, a name she never expected to see in Bradley's house. She folded it slowly, slipping it into her pocket. Her calm expression never changed, but inside, she felt something click. This wasn't just racism. This was something deeper, and the real storm was only beginning. Bradley spent the rest of the week circling her like a shark that smelled blood but couldn't find the wound. Every time Keisha entered a room, he followed with a fake smile, a fake question, or a fake mistake he hoped she'd make real. On Thursday, he tried something new. He tossed a stack of folders onto the kitchen island. Charity reports, donor lists, financial spreadsheets, then pretended to take a phone call. Yeah, I told them I'll handle it. These people don't understand how to manage money anyway." Keisha didn't react, but her eyes scanned the papers. One name jumped at her: Urban Lift Foundation. Her cousin Danielle once fought a case involving them. Interesting. Bradley hung up fast when he noticed her glance. "What are you looking at?" "Just cleaning, sir. You wouldn't understand those reports." "I never claimed I did." "Good," he said, tapping the papers. "Stay in your lane." Keisha nodded, but her mind wasn't in the kitchen anymore. It was already 3 steps ahead. That night, after the kids were asleep, she sat on her couch with her phone and dialed the one person who didn't just understand corruption. She hunted it. "Danielle, I think I found something." Her cousin's voice sharpened instantly. "Talk to me?" Keisha explained Bradley's traps, his comments, the money test, the open wallet, the fake mistakes, and finally, the papers of the Urban Lift name. There was a long silence. "Keisha, those people are dirty. Deep dirty. If he's tied to them, this isn't just racism. This is fraud, mismanagement, and misuse of federal grants." Keisha leaned back. "So he's exactly what I thought he was." "No," Danielle corrected. "He's worse." Keisha exhaled slowly, the weight of her next decision settling over her. "What do we do?" "You keep working. Keep playing the quiet, obedient maid. Let him talk. Let him test. Let him underestimate you. And you? I'll start digging. You just keep recording. Keisha looked at her kids, sleeping in the next room. This wasn't just about her anymore. Bradley wasn't just humiliating a maid. He was part of something bigger, something that hurt families like hers every day. She felt no fear, just clarity. The next morning, Bradley tried another test, leaving a stack of expensive watches on the bathroom sink. She ignored them completely, humming softly while wiping the mirror. He narrowed his eyes. "You're too calm." She smiled. Some of us learn to be. But behind the smile, behind the steady hands, behind the quiet obedience, something else was forming. Something sharp, something strategic. If you believe talent can silence every insult, share this video. And to everyone watching from the US, UK, and Canada, your voice matters. He thought he was studying her, but she was studying him harder. And every arrogant move he made was another piece of evidence she'd soon use to turn his world upside down. By the next week, Danielle had already found more than Keisha expected. Every night, after her kids slept, Keisha sat by the dim kitchen light and listened as her cousin laid out piece after piece of a rotten puzzle. Bradley isn't just a rich racist with a big house, Danielle said. He's on the board of Urban Lift. They receive millions in grants for helping low-income black families. And guess what? The money barely reaches the programs. Keisha pressed the phone to her ear. Where does it go? Shell companies, inflated salaries, fake vendors. He pretends to do charity while lining his pockets. Keisha closed her eyes. And he tests me to prove a stereotype. That's how men like him justify the money they steal. They don't deserve it. Keisha didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. Then we show everyone who really doesn't deserve it. The next day, Bradley was unusually talkative. Racists often are when they think no one is listening. "You know, Keisha," he said while sipping coffee, "I do a lot for your community, way more than you people realize." She folded laundry without looking at him. "That's kind of you, sir." Kind? It's expensive and stressful and not appreciated. "I'm sure it must be." He scoffed. "Honestly, I sometimes wonder why we bother. Half the parents don't even show up to the events. No discipline, no commitment, no gratitude." Keisha placed a neatly folded shirt on the pile. Her phone recorded each word. "Maybe they're busy surviving, sir." "You always have an excuse for them," he snapped. "It's why programs fail. They're not like us." Keisha paused, but only for a breath. "Of course not, sir." Bradley walked away proud of himself, certain he'd won a small battle. He didn't notice the faint smile on her face. That evening, Danielle texted her, "He's hosting a board demonstration Thursday. I think he plans to fire you publicly." Keisha stared at the message, then looked at her reflection in the dark window. "Perfect," she whispered. The morning of a meeting, Bradley was glowing with confidence. He had rehearsed his speech. He had pictures printed. He even had talking points about employee discipline and standards. To him, it was a performance, a chance to humiliate a black woman in front of important people and prove, once again, how unpredictable and unreliable people like her were. But he didn't know that Danielle had alerted the right people. He didn't know she had prepared a file. He didn't know that Keisha had 3 months of recordings. And he definitely didn't know who was waiting outside the building. Keisha pushed the coffee cart into the boardroom exactly on time, wearing the same navy blue uniform he always mocked. Her posture was straight, her face calm. Bradley smirked at the board members. "Gentlemen, today I'll show you how we handle problem employee." Keisha stood silently, hands folded, eyes steady. She wasn't the problem. She was the storm walking into the room. And Bradley was minutes away from realizing it. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and expensive cologne, exactly the kind of place where men like Bradley felt invincible. 15 people sat around the long table, donors, executives, community officials, all white, all comfortable, all ready to watch him discipline his maid. He cleared his throat dramatically. "Ladies and gentlemen, I brought in one of my employees to demonstrate what happens when standards aren't followed. A few chuckles rose around the room. Keisha didn't react. This is Keisha, he continued. She has repeatedly. The door clicked open. A single voice cut through the room like a blade. Actually, she's here to demonstrate something else. Every head turned. Danielle walked in crisp suit, calm stride, eyes razor sharp. Two officials followed her, one from the Grand Oversight Committee, one from Financial Crimes. Bradley frowned. Who are you? Danielle placed a folder on the table. I'm the person who's about to show this board who you really are. Gasps rippled. Bradley laughed nervously. This is absurd. Guards. There are no guards here, Mr. Bradley. The oversight official said, only investigators. Keisha stepped forward, not submissively this time. Calm. Certain. Danielle opened the folder. For 3 months, Keisha documented everything. Every test, every trap, every racially charged comment, every fabricated report you signed, every dollar diverted from Urban Lifts programs. Bradley's face went pale. She's lying. Keisha lifted her phone. These recordings disagree. The first audio clip played aloud. Bradley's voice filled the room. People like her don't deserve charity money. They don't know how to behave. We just hire 1 or 2 for photos. Murmurs spread like wildfire. One board member whispered, "Oh my God!" Danielle placed spreadsheets on the table. Here is a trail of diverted funds. Fake vendors. Shell accounts. Payments approved by you. The financial crimes officer nodded. We've been monitoring the accounts for weeks. It's all real. Bradley's voice cracked. You can't take her word over mine. She's just... Keisha stepped closer, eyes steady. Just what, sir? Silence. The kind that exposes truth more loudly than shouting ever could. Danielle continued. She didn't only record your racism. She recorded your fraud. And since you use a federally funded program to do it, the officer pulled out handcuffs. You're under investigation for financial misconduct, misuse of grant funds, and discriminatory practices. Bradley staggered back. Keisha, please. She didn't flinch. You spent months trying to break me, but all you did was give me everything I needed to break your lies. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, the board stared, not at the fallen man, but at the quiet maid who had just dismantled his empire. Bradley's voice trembled. You ruined me. Keisha shook her head. No, sir, you ruined yourself. I just turned on the light. Security led him out through the hallway, his perfect world collapsing behind him, and the woman he tried to humiliate stood taller than anyone in the room. 6 months later, the world looked nothing like it used to, at least not for Keisha. Her new office sat on the 3rd floor of a small but growing community building, the sunlight warming the framed certificates on the wall. She didn't clean rooms anymore. She audited them. She advised nonprofits. She protected families like her own from people like Bradley. And every time her phone buzzed with a new client inquiry, she remembered the day she almost fell into that trap. Aaliyah sat on the office couch flipping through a school book. Mama, my teacher said we're studying community heroes this month. Can I talk about you? Keisha smiled, touched her daughter's cheek. Only if you want a baby. I do, she said. You help people. Keisha kissed her forehead. I just told the truth. Marcus entered next, proudly waving a report card. All A's, Mama. Keisha hugged him tightly. You earned every one of them. Life was still busy, still real, still full of challenges. But the weight she used to carry, the weight of being underestimated, dismissed, quietly disrespected, was gone. Across town, in a quiet maintenance hallway, Bradley pushed a mop bucket toward an elevator. The uniform he wore wasn't tailored. His shoes weren't polished. No one looked up when he passed. No one said his name. No one cared who he used to be. When the elevator doors opened, he caught a brief glimpse of his reflection. The man staring back wasn't a leader, a donor, or a businessman. He was a warning. Later that week, by chance, he saw Keisha again. She was stepping out her car, confident, calm, focused, holding a binder full of reports she was delivering to a new nonprofit partner. For a second, Bradley froze. He expected anger. He expected revenge. He expected her to spit the same humiliation he once fed her. But she simply nodded once. Not with hate, with closure. He swallowed hard, unable to speak. Keisha turned away, her stride steady, her peace untouchable. Justice hadn't made her cruel. It made her free. If you believe justice should never stay silent, share the story and subscribe for more dark truths.